My name is Lillian Whitmore, 62 years old, keeper of too many memories, and until this morning I thought I knew every corner of my life. I have been a wife for 42 years, a mother for 38, and Clara's best friend for 35. That last title is about to shatter. It was the way the envelope was placed. Not hidden, not tucked away, just lying there on the mahogany desk like it belonged, like it was meant to be seen. I wasn't snooping. I was dusting, like I always did every Tuesday morning, after James left for his golf lessons and before I made myself that second cup of tea. But when I picked up the letter to wipe beneath it, something stopped me. It wasn't addressed to anyone. No name on the front, no stamp, no seal. Just folded paper inside. And I knew the handwriting. Even before I opened it, my hands began to shake, because I recognized those careful curves, those loops on the L's and the way the R dipped just slightly too low. Clara, my best friend for 35 years, my daughter's godmother, my Sunday brunch partner, my secret keeper. I stared at it for what felt like a full minute. Then, slowly, I unfolded the pages. The scent hit me first. Her perfume, light, floral, fake. I read the first line out loud, barely above a whisper. Last night, when you touched my back the way you always do, I almost forgot we were being watched. My knees buckled. I had to sit down. Watched? By whom? By me? The words that followed didn't soften the blow. If anything, they made it worse. The kind of worse that's slow and sticky and sinks into your skin. She wrote about the room I had painted 2 years ago. She wrote about our dog, Jasper, and how he always barked when James arrived. She wrote like she lived here, like she belonged. And James, my James, responded. There were notes in the margins, in his handwriting, tiny, stupid, devastating things. You looked beautiful in that red dress. Same time next Thursday. She suspects nothing. She, me. They meant me. I folded the letter slowly like it was made of glass and one sharp crease would make it scream. I placed it back exactly where I'd found it. Because that's what good wives do, isn't it? They pretend they don't see what's clawing at them from under the bed, from the cracks in the walls, from the perfume on their husband's collar. But I wasn't that wife anymore. Not after reading that letter. James thought I'd never notice. Clara thought I'd never guess. But now I knew. And they were going to find out what it meant to betray someone who'd spent her whole life smiling for other people's comfort. I scrambled the eggs just the way James liked them, soft with a splash of cream and a pinch of chives. The toast popped up golden, the butter already soft on the counter. The coffee brewed in the background, its familiar gurgle filling the silence I couldn't quite name yet. James walked into the kitchen precisely at 7:42, wearing that same navy robe, scratching his chin like he did every morning for the past 27 years. "Smells good," he said, leaning down to kiss the top of my head. His lips grazed my hair, like always. And I smiled. The smile didn't reach my eyes. "How'd you sleep?" he asked, pouring himself coffee as if the world hadn't tilted on its axis 12 hours ago. I stirred the eggs slowly, watching the folds set, not too fast, not too dry. "Like a rock," I said. I wondered if he could hear the thunder beneath my voice. James sat at the table, unfolded the newspaper, and cleared his throat twice before the rustling began. The same routine I could recite with my eyes closed. Only now everything felt off, tilted, like the table legs weren't quite even, like the sun streaming through the window was too bright, too sharp. He was reading the financial section, commenting on something about the market, something about oil prices. His voice, smooth and steady, filled the kitchen like it always did. I responded with the right nods, the right hums, the perfect performance. I served his plate with practiced grace, eggs, toast, a small slice of cantaloupe. I knew he wouldn't touch the fruit. He never did. "You're quiet today," he said between bites. I sipped my tea, still smiling. "Just thinking about the garden." The lilies are coming in early this year. He nodded, didn't look up. I stared at his hands as they held the fork. Those same hands that held mine at the altar. That built our first crib. That fixed the screen door every spring. That apparently also wrote in the margins of letters from Clara. "Do you need anything from the store later?" I asked, my voice warm, too warm. "I'm heading out after lunch." He glanced up, smiling with his mouth, not his eyes. "Maybe pick up that honey I like, the one with the orange label?" I nodded and kissed his cheek. The scent of Clara's perfume, faint but real, lingered on his skin. And still I smiled, because sometimes the most dangerous thing a woman can do is keep smiling while she makes plans. After James left for his appointment, golf, or maybe Clara, I poured myself another cup of tea and sat down at his desk. The letter was still there, right where I'd left it, untouched. That alone said everything. I stared at it like it might blink first, like it might explain itself. I unfolded it again. Slower this time. The paper felt softer today, more alive. And then I saw it. I hadn't noticed before. Maybe I hadn't wanted to. But now the signature stared up at me like a dare. Sincerely, Clara. Not initials, not a cryptic symbol, not even her full name, just Clara. As if that would be enough. As if James would just know who it was from. Of course he would. I sat back in the chair, the leather creaking beneath me, the silence suddenly heavy and thick. The sun from the study window hit the desk at just the wrong angle. Too harsh, too honest. Clara, my Clara, the woman who brought me soup when I had the flu, the woman who danced with me in the kitchen to old Motown songs, the woman who cried with me at my mother's funeral, who held my hand and whispered memories of when we were young. She signed the letter like it was nothing. Like our friendship, decades of it, was just a footnote in her story with James. I reread her final lines. They weren't poetic. They weren't dramatic. They were matter of fact. Next week will be easier. She's already drifting, I can feel it. Drifting. Like I was a cloud. Like I was some fading old photograph, slipping out of focus, out of meaning. I gripped the edge of the desk until my knuckles turned white. My pulse beat in my throat. She had the gall to say that, to write that. And James had read it, responded to it, cherished it probably. Had he saved it like a keepsake? Had he read it more than once? Was it one of many? And why leave it out? Why leave it right there where I could find it? Unless he wanted me to. Unless this was their way of pushing me, gently, quietly, out of my own life. I folded the letter one last time and returned it to its place on the desk, smoothing it flat with my palm. Let them think I hadn't seen it. Let them think I was drifting. Let them think they were clever. I wasn't drifting. I was watching. I used to think Clara's laugh was the most honest sound I knew. Rich, full, infectious. Now, when I hear it in my memory, it sounds like glass cracking under pressure. We met at a church picnic. I was pregnant with our second child, and Clara showed up in a sundress and red lipstick, barefoot in the grass, carrying a lemon pie she didn't even make. She told me that secret a year later, laughing. "I bought it from the bakery on 5th. You really thought I could bake?" I laughed too, back then. Clara was the kind of woman who could sit on your couch for hours, sipping wine and listening like your thoughts were more interesting than the news or her own life. When my sister died, Clara stayed the night on the pull-out sofa. She brought magazines and soup and a fuzzy blanket that smelled like lavender. She didn't say much, just was there. When James and I had our 25th anniversary party, Clara stood beside me in the kitchen, pinning flowers to napkins and whispering advice about how to keep a man happy after 2 decades. "Let him have his silence sometimes," she said, "but never let him stop noticing you." I thought she meant well. She helped me plan our daughter's baby shower, painted my toes when I couldn't reach them after my back surgery, held my hand when I found that lump in my breast, turned out to be nothing, but Clara cried harder than I did waiting for the results. She was woven into every season of my life, every page, every photo album. Now I don't know what to do with all those memories. They sit inside me like spoiled fruit, once sweet, now sour, swollen with secrets. I remember one Christmas, the year our heater broke. Clara brought over space heaters and blankets and insisted we all stay at her place until it was fixed. She made us pancakes shaped like stars. I thought, this is what it means to have a sister by choice. But she wasn't my sister. She wasn't even my friend. She was taking notes. All those nights we sat on the porch with wine. Was she studying me? Waiting for her moment? I want to scream. I want to break something. But instead, I just sit at the kitchen table and stare at the photo of us from that same Christmas. She's got her arm around me. We're laughing. And all I can think is, how long has she been lying to my face? The glass was already in my hand when I felt the weight of it. Delicate, thin-stemmed, one of the good ones we only used on holidays. It caught the light from the window, casting little red-gold reflections onto the counter. The wine inside shimmered like blood. I wanted to throw it. I wanted to watch it shatter against the tile floor. A violent, beautiful explosion. I imagined the sound it would make, the sudden silence that would follow, the mess of sharp edges and spilled truth. But I didn't. My hand trembled, but I held the glass steady. My fingers tightened around the stem until I felt the bone in my thumb push back. I could almost hear Clara's laugh, not the warm one, but the brittle one she saved for things she thought were beneath her. The rage curled up inside my chest like smoke. I wanted to scream into it. I wanted to call her, scream her name, demand answers, demand apologies she didn't deserve to give. Instead, I placed the glass down gently on the counter, so carefully it made no sound at all, because something had shifted in me. This wasn't going to be rage. This wasn't going to be the kind of grief that howls and kicks and cries on the bathroom floor. This wasn't even going to be a scene. This was going to be silence, ice, strategy. Let them think they'd fooled me. Let them sip their coffee and kiss each other's shoulders and plot their little betrayal thinking I was somewhere in the background, folding laundry, tending roses, smiling like a fool. Let them believe I was small, because I was done being soft. I walked to the sink and poured the wine out slowly, watching the dark liquid swirl down the drain like it was washing something out of me. Then I wiped my hands on the towel, folded it neatly, and stood still for a long moment. I'll find out everything, I whispered. I didn't need drama. I didn't need shouting matches or slamming doors. I needed facts. I needed timelines. I needed proof. And once I had those, well, let's just say James and Clara had never seen me angry. Not really. They didn't know the version of me that had held dying parents, buried dreams, survived nights so dark I thought morning would never come. They didn't know what I was capable of when I finally stopped smiling, but they were about to. The key had been in the back of James's cufflink box all along, small, brass, almost ornamental. I'd seen it 100 times before, never curious enough to wonder what it opened. But now I knew. The second drawer in his office. The one that never quite slid all the way shut. The one he always leaned on when I came in, as if to block it without thinking. I waited until Sunday afternoon, when James went to the driving range like clockwork. I watched his car disappear down the street before I moved. The key turned smoothly. No resistance. No warning. Inside, the drawer smelled like cedar and secrets. The first thing I saw was a shoebox, unmarked but heavy. I lifted the lid slowly, half expecting it to bite. Photos, dozens of them. James and Clara, never overtly inappropriate, never caught kissing, but always close. Sitting too close on a park bench, laughing with their heads tilted inward. Holding hands under a restaurant table caught in the corner of a reflective window. Some were selfies, others were clearly taken by someone else. My stomach twisted. Who had been following them? Who had been helping them? Underneath the photos, ticket stubs, New York, Santa Fe, that little jazz club in New Orleans we once said we'd go to together. They'd gone, without me. Folded napkins with lipstick kisses. Restaurant receipts, scribbled with notes in Clara's handwriting. Next time, oysters. Or, you blushed when I said your name. Underneath it all, more letters. Not just the one I'd found on the desk. These were bundled together with a red ribbon. She was sentimental, my Clara. The oldest dated back nearly 2 years. 2 years. While I'd been comforting her through her divorce. She had been planning this. I sat down on the edge of the office chair, the photos spilling across my lap like confessions. Each one whispered something new, something sharp. In the back of the drawer, tucked inside a plain white envelope, a hotel keycard. Room 406. No hotel name, no date, just the card. But it said enough. I gathered everything slowly, carefully, like evidence from a crime scene. Because that's what this was now. A crime. Not in the eyes of the law, maybe, but in the eyes of a woman who had given her whole life to a man who smiled while he slipped away. I closed the drawer, locked it, and placed the key back in the cufflink box. They thought I would never know. But now, I knew everything. The roast was in the oven by 4. The potatoes were peeled, the carrots sliced, the table set with the good china. The kind we only used when our children came home. I lit the candles, not because the room needed light, but because it gave my hands something to do. James came into the kitchen humming. He kissed my cheek and asked, "Need help with anything, sweetheart?" I almost laughed, but I didn't. I smiled and handed him the wine. "Open the Merlot. The kids like that one." They arrived a little after 5, our daughter Margaret first with her new boyfriend in tow. He was quiet, polite, smelled like cedarwood and nervous sweat. Then came our son, Peter, holding his twins like footballs, his wife trailing behind him with diaper bags and apology eyes. The house came alive with voices and shoes being kicked off and the thud of juice boxes hitting the floor. I smiled, hugged, asked questions. My hands moved from shoulder to shoulder, pouring wine, passing napkins, touching my family like I was trying to remember the shape of each life I'd helped build. James told a joke at the table. One I'd heard before. Everyone laughed. He laughed the loudest. His hand found mine under the table, gave it a little squeeze, like always. I didn't pull away. "Mom, this is delicious," Peter said between bites of roast. "I don't know how you get the carrots that soft." I thanked him, refilled his plate, took a sip of wine I couldn't taste. Margaret leaned back in her chair and said, "You two are still goals, you know that." She smiled at James. "Still in love after all these years?" James smiled back, full, easy, so believable. I watched him, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners, the way he played the role of doting husband like it was second nature. "Not always easy," he said, reaching for his glass. "But your mother makes it a joy." I nearly choked. The lie was smooth, seamless. I nodded slowly as if touched and looked at my daughter, who had no idea she was watching a woman play herself. After dinner, while James helped Peter fix a toy in the living room, I stood at the sink with Margaret. She dried the dishes, her bracelet clinking against the china. "You and Dad are lucky," she said softly. "So many people just stop trying." I swallowed the bitterness and smiled again. Yes, we are lucky. But in that moment, I knew luck had nothing to do with it. It was performance, precision, timing, and I had just stolen the spotlight. I sat in the driveway with the engine off, the heat still humming quietly around me, wrapped in the silence of a winter afternoon that hadn't decided if it wanted to snow. My phone was in my hand, already unlocked, Clara's name glowing softly on the screen. I stared at it for a full minute, maybe more. Then I pressed call. She answered on the second ring. Lillian, what a surprise! Her voice, syrupy sweet, poured through the speaker like she'd just been thinking of me. I smiled. I made sure she could hear it in my voice. Clara. Hi. I was just out running errands and thought of you. How are you? Oh, you know, she laughed lightly. Keeping busy. I've started that pottery class I told you about. You have to see the vase I made. It's hideous, but I'm proud. She was good. So good. I'd love to see it, I said softly. Maybe we could do lunch sometime next week. There was a pause, a brief hesitation. Of course, she replied quickly, smoothing over it. I miss our talks. Things haven't felt quite the same lately, have they? No, Clara. They haven't. I've been thinking a lot about old times, I said, letting my voice go soft, like a woman remembering rather than suspecting. The trip to Charleston. Remember when we lost our luggage and you had to borrow my clothes for the whole weekend? She laughed. Oh, God, yes. I looked like your understudy. We both laughed. It almost felt real. I've just been feeling a little nostalgic lately, I added. James has been so busy, and the house feels a bit too quiet sometimes. Clara hummed in sympathy. Men do get wrapped up in their routines. But James is lucky to have you, Lillian. You're the kind of woman no one forgets. I looked out the window, watching a neighbour's dog sniff at our mailbox. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Well, I said gently, that's kind of you to say. Another pause, shorter this time. Then, is everything all right? I smiled wider. Of course, just missing my friend. Clara exhaled in relief. We'll catch up properly soon. I'll text you. I'm so glad you called. So am I. I ended the call. My hands were trembling, not with fear, with clarity. She had no idea I knew, and that was exactly how I wanted it. The law office was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, but in atmosphere. Clean, polished, sharp. A place where people took lives apart carefully, like watchmakers dismantling time. Her name was Evelyn Shaw. Sharp bob, silver necklace, black pen that never stopped moving. She greeted me with a firm handshake and eyes that said, I've seen worse. Tell me why you're here, she said, her voice calm. I took a breath. I'm not filing yet. I'm just gathering facts. She nodded once, professional, unreadable. Are you safe? I blinked. Yes, not that kind of marriage. Emotional infidelity, then. I stared at her for a second, then reached into my purse and slid the letter across the desk. The one signed by Clara. Evelyn didn't flinch. She read the first few lines, then the margin notes in James's handwriting. When she looked up, her eyes had sharpened. I see. I want to know what's mine, I said, before they try to take it. She leaned back, crossed one leg over the other. Let's talk about assets. So I told her about the house, the savings, James's pension, our joint accounts. But then I mentioned the lake cabin my aunt left me 5 years ago, the one in my name only. I'd almost forgotten it, so small, so quiet. Just a place I used to escape to once a year when I needed to breathe. Evelyn perked up. Inherited property. In your name alone. That's protected, Lillian. She pulled a folder toward her and began scribbling notes. Anything else? Land? Family trusts? I hesitated. Then I remembered something my mother once told me. Something I hadn't thought about in years. My grandmother left me a fund. My father transferred it to me when he passed. It's been sitting in a credit union. I haven't touched it. How much? Evelyn asked. 72,000, I said quietly, give or take. She looked up, smiled, not unkindly, but with precision. That's more than enough to fight him. And to win. My heart didn't race. It slowed, steadied. Evelyn slid a packet toward me. We don't need to file today, but I'd start making copies. Quietly. Bank statements, tax returns, anything he wouldn't want you to see. And Lillian? Yes? Don't let the calm fool them. A woman with quiet rage and resources that's the most dangerous kind. I smiled for real for the first time in weeks. Yes, I said. I'm starting to believe that too. Margaret called just after 9, her voice a little too bright, like someone clinging to the edges of a script they didn't write. Do you have time for coffee tomorrow, Mum? Just the two of us? Of course I said yes. We met at the little place near the library, the one with crooked chairs and those terrible muffins we both pretend to enjoy. She was already there when I arrived, stirring her coffee like it had offended her. I kissed her cheek, sat down, smiled. What's going on? She looked up, startled maybe that I could still read her that fast. She hesitated, bit her lip, then she whispered, Do you ever feel like you're living beside someone instead of with them? I blinked. The question hit harder than I expected. She stared at her hands. Tom's been distant. Not cruel, just absent. Always tired. Always working late. I ask him questions and he answers, but there's no warmth, no spark. It's like I'm talking to a man-shaped wall. I reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers were cold. She looked at me. Not as a daughter looks at her mother, but as one woman looks at another when she finally admits she's scared. I saw myself in that moment, 25 years ago, sitting on the edge of my own kitchen table, wondering when James had stopped looking at me like I mattered. You're not crazy, I said gently, and you're not weak. Loving someone who forgets how to love you back, that's not weakness. That's hope. And hope can hurt. Her eyes filled with tears, but none fell. Do you think he's cheating? She asked, voice barely a whisper. I could have lied. I could have said no. I could have spared her the ache. But something in me refused to offer comfort wrapped in denial. I don't know, I said truthfully. But if you feel like you're disappearing in your own home, it's time to start paying attention. She nodded slowly. We didn't talk about James, not directly, but I knew, instinctively, that she felt something under the surface too. Children always do. As we parted ways, she hugged me tightly and said, I'm glad you're still you, Mom. I walked back to my car in silence, heart heavy. She didn't know I wasn't still me. She didn't know I was someone new now, someone who watched more than she spoke, someone who was done disappearing. I cleaned the house like I always did before Clara came over. Fluffed the cushions, wiped the countertops, arranged fresh flowers from the backyard vase first, not root first, like she once teased me for doing. Everything looked just like she remembered. I wore blue. She always said it brought out my eyes. She arrived 10 minutes late. Not unusual, not suspicious, but enough to make me wonder if she had sat in her car first, rehearsing. Lillian! She sang out as I opened the door. Her hug was tight, too long, like she was trying to fold herself into me and hide from something. I smiled and let her in. Come in, come in. I made that ginger lemon tea you love. Still spoiling me after all these years, she said with a soft laugh, setting her purse down. I watched her eyes. She scanned the room, like she was looking for something, or someone, or maybe checking what I knew. We settled into the sunroom, just like always, the light slanting in golden over the table. I poured the tea. Clara stirred hers like a nervous habit, not even adding sugar. So, I said, folding my hands in my lap, how's life been treating you? Clara's smile faltered for half a second, a crack that would have gone unnoticed if I hadn't been studying her like a case file. Oh, life keeps us on our toes. Still seeing my therapist, still trying to write that book, she sipped. And you? How's James? I tilted my head. Busy. Distant, maybe. You know how men get at this age. Always preoccupied, she gave a tight nod. Yes. Yes, they do. Sometimes I wonder, I continued, my voice soft, if they wander when we're not looking. She looked down at her tea. Lillian? Yes? She shook her head with a practiced smile. You always think too much. James adores you. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make her shift in her seat. I used to believe that, I said quietly. She opened her mouth, closed it, sipped again. I've been having these strange dreams, I said, leaning in slightly. About trust, about knives in gardens. You ever have dreams like that? Her hand trembled slightly as she set her cup down. No, she said. Not really. I smiled. Strange. They feel so real. We talked for another 15 minutes about nothing. She avoided my eyes the entire time. When she left, she hugged me again, but lighter this time, like she didn't want to get caught in my skin. And I stood in the doorway, watching her walk away like someone who knew the clock had just started ticking. It came in just after midnight, a chime, a blinking light, one new voice message from Clara Whitmore. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, heart already climbing. Maybe it was about our tea. Maybe she wanted to say something she couldn't face to face. I pressed play. At first there was nothing, just the rustle of fabric, a car door closing, the faint hum of a radio. Then her voice, lower, softer, wrapped in a tone I'd never heard from her, not once in 35 years. God, James, today was awful. I don't think I can do this much longer. Lillian looked at me like she knew, like she could see it all over me. I thought I was going to choke on that damn tea. My stomach dropped. I can't play this game forever, she continued. She's not stupid. She's just quiet. And that makes it worse. You said we'd be done with this by now. You said the paperwork would be filed by June. It's almost August. What are we even waiting for? I gripped the edge of the nightstand. I don't want to sneak around anymore. I'm tired of pretending I'm her best friend while you go home and lie in bed next to her. It's disgusting. You told me she was fragile. But she doesn't look fragile to me. She looks like she's waiting. And that scares me, James. I think she's planning something. A pause. A sigh. I love you. I love you more than I thought I could love anyone. But you need to make a decision. Soon. Because if she finds out, if she really finds out, the recording cut off. I sat frozen, the phone still in my hand, the message still echoing in my bones. She hadn't meant to send it to me. She must have hit the wrong name in her contact list. Too quick, too careless. Or maybe it wasn't careless. Maybe part of her wanted me to hear it, to push me, to finish whatever game she thought she was winning. But it didn't matter, because now I had a voice. Her voice, admitting everything. No metaphors, no tea-soaked metaphors, no vague glances or sidelong guilt, just the truth. Unfiltered, undeniable. I played it again, then again. Then I saved it. And finally I lay back on my pillow and stared at the ceiling, not crying, not shaking, only thinking one thought. They had no idea what I was capable of, but they were about to learn. James was already in bed when I came upstairs. The lights were off, his breathing slow and even. Too even. The kind of rhythm you fake when you don't want to be spoken to. I stood in the doorway for a moment, staring at the shape of him under the quilt. The same quilt my mother had stitched for our anniversary. His back was to me. Always his back these days. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just watched the rise and fall of his shoulders and wondered how long I'd been lying beside a stranger. Then I turned, walked down the hallway and kept going. The couch wasn't comfortable. Never had been. The cushions sagged, the armrest creaked, and the throw blanket had a scratchy spot in the corner. But it was mine tonight. I sat in the dark, legs tucked under me, listening to the silence of a house I used to feel safe in. I thought about the girl I used to be, bright-eyed, full of plans, the one who wore white at the altar and believed James when he said, always. The one who raised babies and packed lunches and turned her head the other way when he worked late. I thought about all the nights I stayed up sewing Halloween costumes, all the mornings I made coffee for a man who had stopped tasting it. And then I thought about the letter, the photos, the ribbon around the stack of notes, the voice memo, Her voice, her guilt, her love, and my rage, sitting just beneath the surface, simmering, waiting. I stared at the ceiling and asked myself the questions I hadn't dared to say aloud. Was it me? Was I not enough? Too plain? Too familiar? Too steady? When did I become invisible? And more terrifying, when did I agree to it? I didn't cry. I didn't move. I just lay there counting my regrets like ceiling tiles. At some point the sky began to shift, dark blue giving way to pale grey. The house creaked softly like it was remembering things too. And I made a decision. I wouldn't sleep beside him again. Not until I could look him in the eye and see fear. Not until he knew that the quiet woman folding laundry downstairs was gone, and someone sharper, colder, and far more dangerous had taken her place. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, let my eyes close. It wasn't peace, but it was clarity. It was Helen who called. Helen, of all people. We hadn't spoken more than polite holiday small talk in years, but her voice on the phone was urgent, low, almost embarrassed. Lillian, can we meet? Somewhere quiet. I think I've waited too long to say something and I can't hold it in anymore. We met at the Greenhouse Cafe off Maple, the one Clara always found too stuffy. I ordered chamomile. Helen didn't order anything. She just sat there, fiddling with the strap on her purse like it might snap under the pressure of what she'd carried. I'm not proud of this, she began. I didn't know how to bring it up before, didn't want to stir things that might not be true, but I've had this pit in my stomach for over a year. I waited. I didn't blink. It's Clara, she said, and James. My heart didn't race, not anymore. I was past that. Helen looked at me like she was preparing for a slap. I think they've been involved longer than anyone realizes. I saw them once, about 8 months ago, at the Lake House fundraiser. They were standing too close. Clara was wearing that red dress she only brings out when she wants to be noticed. And James, he looked at her like he didn't care who saw. I nodded slowly. Why didn't you tell me then? Helen's eyes filled with shame. Because I didn't want to be the messenger. Because I told myself maybe it was nothing. And maybe, if I just pretended I hadn't seen it, it wouldn't become real. I'm sorry, Lillian. Truly. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper, an invitation to a private charity gala that happened 6 weeks ago. Clara's name was listed as James's +1. They must have assumed you'd never see this copy. It went out to a limited donor list. But my cousin works with the event coordinator. She kept it for me. Said it felt wrong. I stared at the names, printed neatly in black ink. No attempt to hide. Just shameless. I slid the paper into my purse. Thank you, Helen. I didn't know if I had the right, she whispered. But you deserve the truth. You always have. I reached across the table, touched her hand. You did the right thing, I said. Now I know who's really been watching all this time, and who's just been pretending. Helen blinked back tears. I didn't. I was already too far past crying. The locksmith arrived just after 10, a polite man named Travis with a gentle voice and quiet hands. He didn't ask questions when I said, I'd like the locks changed on all the exterior doors. Today. He just nodded, wiped his boots, and got to work. I watched him from the kitchen window, arms crossed, coffee cooling untouched on the counter. Each turn of his screwdriver felt like a stitch being undone, not in something broken, but something healing. By noon, it was done. 3 doors, 3 new locks, 3 fresh keys. One of them I dropped in the bottom of my purse. Another I placed in the top drawer of the kitchen, beside the extra batteries and takeout menus. The third stayed with me. James came home at 5:38, right on time. I heard the rattle first, keys that didn't work anymore. A pause, then again, harder, then the knock, firm, confused. I opened the door slowly. He blinked at me, clearly startled by the sight of me standing there. So calm. So ready. "Lillian," he said with that half-smile he always used when he was trying to cover a mistake. "Something's wrong with my key." I didn't move. "It's not your key anymore." He laughed once, short and sharp. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, stepping aside just far enough for him to enter, "that we need to talk." He hesitated, just for a second. That flash of something in his eyes. Not fear, not yet, but the scent of it. He walked in like a man who'd been summoned to his own funeral but hadn't yet realized he was the guest of honor. I closed the door behind him, gently. He stood in the entryway, jacket still on, looking at me like I'd grown new skin. "What is this, Lillian?" he asked. "Some kind of joke?" "No." I moved past him into the living room, sat down, crossed my legs. "Then what?" he said, arms spreading slightly, the way he always did when he wanted to appear reasonable. "You changed the locks? Why?" I tilted my head. "Because things have changed, James." He opened his mouth, a protest maybe, a lie definitely but I lifted one hand. "Sit down." And, to my quiet, cold satisfaction, he did. For the first time in a long time, I was no longer trying to be understood. I was making sure I was heard. He sat across from me at the dining table, the same table where we'd hosted birthdays, carved turkeys, toasted anniversaries. Tonight it was a stage, and I was done playing the quiet wife in the wings. James leaned forward, elbows on the wood like we were teammates. "Lillian, whatever this is, whatever you think it is, can we just talk it through?" I folded my hands. My voice came out steady. "How long have you been sleeping with Clara?" His mouth twitched, just slightly, a crack in the mask. "What are you talking about?" "Don't insult me," I said softly. "Not tonight." He looked away, looked back. "She's your friend." "That's not—" "She was my friend," I corrected. "Now she's a woman who accidentally sent me a voicemail in which she called you darling and complained that you were still sleeping in my bed." James paled. Just a shade. I didn't move. "I found the letters," I continued. "The ones she wrote, the ones you answered in the margins, the pictures, the ticket stubs, the hotel key." He opened his mouth. I didn't let him speak. "I invited her to tea, James. She couldn't look me in the eye. Do you know how long we've been friends? 35 years. And she looked at her cup like it might testify against her." He exhaled slowly. Tried to smile. "Lillian, I didn't mean for it to happen." "No," I said, voice like glass. "You meant every second of it. You planned it. You hid it. You cherished it." He stood suddenly, pushing back from the table, pacing. "You don't understand how I got old," I offered. "Bored? Weak?" He stopped, stared at me. I felt invisible. "And so you crawled into bed with someone who knew me better than anyone." "She was there," he said, his voice breaking now. "When you were busy. When you stopped asking how I was feeling. When the house got so quiet." "The house didn't get quiet," I said, standing too. "You stopped listening." He looked like he might cry, but I didn't flinch. "You don't get to rewrite this, James. You don't get to make your betrayal my fault." He sat down heavily, suddenly small in the chair where he used to carve roast beef and pretend to love me. I leaned over the table, the air between us cold and final. "I'm not here for apologies," I said. "I'm here to let you know I'm done playing dumb." His hands trembled. Mine didn't. He thought the worst had already happened. He was wrong. The pen felt heavier than usual, not in weight, but in what it carried. I sat at the desk in the sunroom, the one James had once called my thinking corner. That had been before I learned he'd been thinking elsewhere, with someone else. The will sat open before me, clean, precise, unsentimental, just the way I wanted it. No more shared clauses, no more "we leave," just I. I left the house to Wade and Elizabeth, equally. I left the condo to Elizabeth. She'd always loved the city, the garden heirlooms, the rose china, my mother's copper watering can, the quilt my grandmother hand-stitched, all now carefully itemised. James? Nothing. Not a cent. Not a word. He had already taken enough. I had Patricia, my lawyer, draft an addendum. Should he contest, every dollar would go to a women's shelter I'd quietly supported for years. She smiled when she read the clause. Elegant vengeance, she called it. But the most important part wasn't the legal language, it was the letter. Handwritten, 4 pages, tucked into a sealed envelope to be opened only when I was no longer here to explain myself in person. Dear Wade, dear Elizabeth, you grew up thinking your father and I were solid, dependable as the seasons. That was by design. I wanted you to have a home where things made sense. But the truth, my loves, is that even strong things can crack. You need to know, your father betrayed more than just vows. He betrayed trust. He betrayed time. And he did it not with a stranger, but with someone I once called sister. I want you to understand something clearly. This isn't revenge. It's preservation. Everything I've worked for, everything I protected, it's yours now. Because I trust you to honour it, to carry it forward with the integrity I see in both of you. You will hear different stories. People will defend him, that's fine. Let them. But when you read this, and I hope you're old enough to understand when you do, I want you to know your mother didn't sit silently and accept disrespect. I stood up, I fought smart, and I protected what mattered. You. Always you. I sealed the letter, placed it in the back of my safe, alongside the updated will. Then I walked into the kitchen, turned on the kettle, and waited for the water to boil. Not like a woman grieving a lost marriage, but like one preparing for whatever would come next. The envelope had no return address. Just my name, Lillian Whitmore, written in Clara's unmistakable slanted handwriting, the same script she used on birthday cards, holiday invitations, the place cards at our daughter's wedding. I didn't open it right away. I stared at it for a long time, the weight of it resting on my lap like something alive, something coiled. When I finally slid the blade along the seal and unfolded the pages, the scent of her perfume, that cloying gardenia she insisted was classic, lifted faintly from the paper. Lillian, if you're reading this, it means I didn't have the courage to say these things out loud. You know I've never been good at confrontation, always choosing silence over conflict, smiles over truth. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to understand. I didn't plan it. Not at first. James was lonely. You were always so composed, untouchable. I felt invisible when I came around, like an extra in your perfect life. I didn't set out to fall for him, I really didn't, but one afternoon he stayed behind after helping Wade fix the patio lights. We talked. About things you and I never talked about anymore. About getting older, about fear, about feeling forgotten. He made me feel seen, Lillian. Do you know how rare that is? Maybe you'll say I should have walked away, that I should have remembered you first. I did try. I distanced myself, but he came back, again and again, and I was weak. God, I was weak. The worst part is, I miss you. I miss your laugh in the morning. I miss how you always knew when I was lying, even when I thought I was being clever. I miss our long drives to nowhere with coffee and no plan. I ruined all that, and I know I did. People will judge me. They should. I broke something sacred. But Lillian, I hope somewhere inside you you remember the years before the mistake, the decades of friendship. I don't know if you'll ever speak to me again, but if you do, if you even want to scream at me across a table, I'll be there. Always, Clara. I folded the letter carefully, pressed the edges smooth, and placed it back in the envelope. Then I slid it into the drawer beneath the old wedding china. Where forgotten things go, I didn't need to respond. Some silences speak loudest of all. It was late afternoon when Elizabeth dropped by with Charlotte. The air smelled like lilacs, and the sun filtered through the kitchen window in long, honey-coloured streaks. Charlotte ran in ahead of her mother, shoes half untied, curls bouncing, cheeks flushed with the kind of joy only 5-year-olds seem to access so freely. "Grandma Lillian!" she shouted, holding up a folded piece of construction paper like it was a priceless treasure. "I made you something." I dried my hands on a dish towel, smiling as she thrust the drawing into mine. It was simple. Crayon lines and soft smudges, the kind only small fingers can create. A house. My house, drawn slightly crooked but full of charm. Yellow windows, a garden exploding with every flower under the sun, and standing in the centre beneath a smiling sky was me. In a blue dress. With a crown. Charlotte beamed. "That's you in your castle. And those are your flowers. And that," she pointed to a heart in the corner, "that's so you don't forget I love you." I blinked quickly. Too quickly. "It's beautiful, Charlotte," I whispered, kneeling down to kiss her forehead. "I'll keep it forever." She skipped off to raid the cookie jar, leaving me with the paper in my hands and something swelling in my chest I hadn't felt in months. Not just love, but peace. Not the dull, quiet peace that comes from giving up, but the kind that grows in the ruins because the ground is finally clean. Elizabeth leaned against the counter watching me. "She wanted to draw your house. She said it's the happiest place she knows." I nodded, still staring at the little crayon flowers. "You know," I said, "a few months ago I was convinced this place had become a mausoleum, full of memories that hurt more than they healed." Elizabeth walked over, put her hand on mine. "It's not," she said. "You're here. That's what makes it alive." I looked at my daughter, strong, resilient, choosing honesty in her own marriage now, refusing to repeat my old patterns. We sat in silence for a while. Charlotte munched cookies at the table, humming softly, surrounded by drawings and crumbs and sunshine. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself breathe fully. The past still lived here, in the wood, in the shadows, in the creaking stairs. But so did something new. The sound of healing, the scent of forgiveness, the unshakable truth that light always finds a way back in. "Dear James, you'll never see this letter. That's the point. For once I'm writing something for me. Not to convince you, not to spare your feelings, not to preserve the illusion of civility we've both worn like old coats. Just the truth. Just my voice. Unfiltered. I loved you. God, I loved you with the kind of loyalty that was blind and tireless and foolish. I loved you in the mornings when you were grumpy. I loved you through job changes and quiet dinners and holidays where you said too little or too much. I loved you even when I began to suspect that you had stopped loving me. And I waited. I waited for you to see me again. But instead, you found someone who mirrored your restlessness. Someone who made you feel like the man you missed being. You betrayed me not just with your body, but with your silence. With the way you walked past me each morning, knowing full well what you were hiding behind your eyes. You thought I'd never notice, but I did. And when I did, I didn't scream. I didn't throw you out. I didn't make a scene. I watched. I learned. I gathered. Because after decades of serving everyone else's comfort, I finally chose my own dignity. You once told me I was the calm in your storm. That's the irony. You mistook my calm for weakness. You forgot that calm is what survives the storm. This letter is not a plea. It is not an explanation. It's an exhale. I'm letting go of the years I gave you that you didn't deserve. I'm letting go of the woman I became just to keep us afloat, the smiling hostess, the peacemaker, the ghost in her own life. You don't get to keep any more of my energy. I'm walking forward, with my children, with the granddaughter who drew me as a queen in her kingdom, With the garden I've tended alone for years without realizing it. I'm not rebuilding the life we had. I'm building a new one. And you won't be in it. Goodbye, Lillian. I folded the paper once, twice. I stepped into the yard as the stars blinked awake above me, struck a match and held the flame to the corner. The paper curled in on itself, ember by ember, until only ash remained, carried away by a wind that didn't ask permission. I watched it go. Then I turned back toward the house and didn't look over my shoulder. What part of this story touched you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to read them. If this story felt close to your heart, give it a like, subscribe if you want to be part of a space where real stories matter. Got a couple more minutes? Check out the next story. It's also about the things we rarely say out loud.